All right, everybody, here we go. Welcome back to Stocks by the Numbers, and I'm sure you heard about it already, but I wanted to do just a quick look here at Nvidia Corporation, symbol NVDA, listed here on the NASDAQ. I said time and time again, I've been saying it for years, and yes, I may have missed this massive run and explosion. However, this is why when you have, in my opinion, a fake overpump stock, you have to be careful, and that's why in my opinion, as we were hitting these highs, of course you could say it's all hindsight, but I said the entire time as we were going up that the company was heavily overvalued and it was just weighing too much on the S&P and the rest of the markets overall. And you can see one announcement today drops the stock down to 118.5 currently, down 17%. Dropped down to 116 today. In my opinion, we could potentially see sub 100, and you can be looking at about this 95.5 key level that we hit going back to March of 24 and touching again in May of 24. We technically also have a small gap up here. You can see, it might be hard to see. Let me zoom in, but you can see this top of this candle here on January 30th, 2024, top left of the screen, you can see the high 63.49, and then we come to this candle here and you can see the low 63.69. So we technically do have about a 20-cent gap that could fill all the way down to 63.5, and then believe it or not, coming all the way back here to this high, looks like the third week of November in 2021, stock hit 34.65, goes down, rallies back, and then gaps up to 36.64. So technically you could also fill that gap to 34.64. If this sounds like an extreme drop to you, well then again, welcome to my world, because this was an extreme pump. And in my eyes, I mean, I understand the reason behind it, but it was just too much too quick. And I said time and time again, in my opinion, there is no way in hell that this company is worth $3.5 trillion. And that's why even here, sitting at 2.9, to bring it down to 95, to bring it down to 60, which would be a 50% drop roughly from here, we would still be sitting at almost a $1.5 trillion market cap, which is why laying out these key levels and looking for a potential pullback even all the way down into the 30s, obviously if you own it, you don't want to hear it, or if you just bought this dip, you don't want to hear it. But again, we have to be honest, we have to be realistic on this channel. And again, we have one announcement, DeepSeek, we have AI potentially coming out of China, and they say basically that they don't really need Nvidia chips, and they can do it for cheaper than we can do it, which was almost inevitable in my opinion. Seems like that's the strategy over there in the Far East. But as you see, Nvidia sinks, DeepSeek, advances prove need. Well, Nvidia, of course, says that. Nvidia on Monday said Chinese AI firm DeepSeek's advances show the usefulness of its chips for the Chinese market, and more of its chips will be needed in the future to meet demand for DeepSeek services. Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but that's just me. Quote, DeepSeek's work illustrates how new models can be created using that technique, leveraging widely available models and compute that is fully export control compliant. Nvidia shares dropped 17%. That's just OpenAI, fewer Nvidia chips. DeepSeek was also struggling on Monday to accommodate an influx of new users. Quote, inference requires significant numbers of Nvidia GPUs and high performance networking. But basically, I think that, in my opinion, I think the overall original quote-unquote vibe, if you will, was the fact that, like, Nvidia was its own player, it was on its own level, and no one can compete, no one's even close. And now you have a story like this coming out in China. And listen, again, I understand the appeal behind Nvidia. I never bashed the company, if you recall. I always said the earnings look good, the company's growing like an animal. The problem is we just went too high too quick. And that's why I was always saying this entire time that I would be very careful buying into Nvidia. And now anyone who bought in recently, obviously at the 140 mark, for all you know, we might, dip down and remain quiet for a year or two before it starts to climb back up and get back to your cost basis. So that's why I always said, in my opinion, you should be very careful about buying not only a stock at overvalued, inflated highs, but also with the market trading at these highs as well. So I always try to mention my concern on that, and now today you have some news hit. And again, the stock takes a massive hit. And of course, brings down almost every other stock connected to it in the sector. Which is why, I said time and time again, it is very dangerous to pump Nvidia up the way we were. And now you can see why. Look, you keep seeing these articles saying it's not going to affect USAI, yet everything took a massive drop. I'm reading. Oh, Lord. See how weighted Nvidia is? Look at how many articles came out. Look, we're scrolling down. We're still only 3 hours ago. Look at this. DeepSeek hit by cyber attack. Probably was us. Still going. Look at all these articles. Look, 5 hours ago. Piper Sandler just upgraded. Cantor Fitzgerald, price target maintained $200 a share. In my opinion, they must have clients in it. We're reading. Look at this. These are all articles that just came out. Look, today, 7 hours ago. We're reading. Oh, wow. And we finally got to the other day's news. That's wild. Look at all those articles coming out. That's why, again, I'll keep going like a broken record, baby. I said time and time again, you should be very careful and very hesitant about stepping into something like Nvidia, which is why I said I would personally like the backup players. Obviously, we have AMD hitting new lows as well, down here 113, and SMCI took a big hit as well, because everyone feels that they can't do business without Nvidia, which in my opinion isn't necessarily true, but I feel that they're trying to scare out investors. So just a quick side note here, my original analysis, or even my recent analysis that I've done on stocks like AMD and SMCI, in my opinion, I still think there's tremendous value there. Nvidia is still tremendously overvalued in my opinion. So even looking at this 17-18% drop today, I personally still would not be a buyer of Nvidia. That is just my opinion. But these are a couple of the key levels that I think you should keep an eye on. And if we draw out, let's see if we do a quick trend line here. Right? You can see that technically this was the low going back October of 22, and we bounced off the line and have been, on the up and up. So this is your long-term support trend line, and you can see today we completely flash crashed and broke right below it. That's why a pullback to 95.5, I really don't think many people can argue with me. Maybe you'd get upset if it drops to 63.5, but again, in my opinion, I think it would be 110% justified. We have a 58 PE. I understand they're extremely profitable. The demand is up. The revenue's been growing like crazy. Look at these profit margins, over 50%. And you can see as of last quarter, $35 billion in revenue. Right? If we back it up several quarters, you can see, look, the company was doing $6 billion, $7 billion, and then we jumped up and started running and absolutely exploding. And I also mentioned how convenient it was at how much weight they put on Nvidia, how high, it was the sole reason, in my opinion, as to why the markets were really raging and consistently hitting new highs. And again, I spoke about how, in my eyes, it may have been a little fishy. I still say it's fishy. How these estimates were somehow consistently being lowballed to Nvidia, right? They saw the demand coming in. Estimates jump up to 11 billion. They post 13.5 billion. They beat it by over 2 billion. And again, 16.29 billion. They post over 18. Why are these estimates so low? 20 billion. They post 22. You can see this consistently. 24.6. They post 26. Look at this. 28.7. They post 30. 33, they post 35. Somehow, this company is always like 1.5 to 2+ billion in revenue above analyst expectations. Yet it's amazing how when you look at so many other companies and you look at the earnings reports, they'll just beat by a couple of million, or they'll just beat the EPS maybe by like a cent and a half, or they'll miss by 2 cents, or again, they'll miss on the revenue by like, you know, 0.1 billion or whatever. It's amazing how close and how accurate all of these analysts could be when laying out earnings estimates for almost every single stock across the board from A to Z. Yet somehow with Nvidia, they're consistently below the actual business that the company is doing. So this is why, again, I mentioned I may have missed this big run, but I voiced my concerns. And if we look at the revenue again, I know 24 revenue is chunking up, but even if we go back to 2023, you can see 61 billion in revenue, net income almost 30 billion. You add that up, you're looking at about 90 billion in change for the year. Market cap was 3.5 trillion. Market cap still sitting at 2.9 trillion for a company that brought in roughly 100 billion in business for 2023. And again, even if we look at 2024, 26, 30 is 56, that's 80, that's 90, with about another 50, so that's 140. Even if you call it 200, even if you call it 200 billion for the year, we are still trading, after this drop, we are still trading 14 times 2024 revenue and profit. So this is why I said again, in my opinion, I would look for the more undervalued backup tech players. And if we switch over to stock charts real quick, I'll let you go. We can see the RSI drop down to sub 34, still hasn't hit that 30 benchmark, so it can continue to keep dropping. 200-day moving average here, 120, 174. We obviously broke straight through that. We're sitting at the 117s. MACD crossed to the downside. This can add to the sell-off, in my opinion. Switching over to the weekly, you can see, look, and even as overvalued as it was, look at the RSI, well above the benchmark. And again, only if the people owned it or potentially owned stocks connected to it would they try to defend it. Because traders always tell me, oh, it's overbought, it's oversold, right? But when it came to a powerhouse like this, we tried to throw technicals out the window. And you can see the 50-day moving average on the weekly, 117.05. Stock broke it quickly to 116.70. And we could potentially close at or above this moving average. But in my opinion, I still say we should really continue to drop down. Bottom Bollinger Band on the weekly, 118.16. We're below that. And you can see, look at the 200-day moving average sitting at around 50 bucks. So that's why even calling for a 50% sell-off back to 63.5 doesn't seem too crazy the more you check out these technicals. RSI on the weekly still sitting above 43. We can continue to drop down. MACD recently crossed, obviously, back in December, even though, of course, the stock stayed up well above the mid-Bollinger Band, and then now, obviously, had a big drop today. So, in my opinion, that's how I feel about this one. I'm not trying to rub it in by any means, because, of course, if you owned it, basically before today, you're probably up a chunk. So it's been doing very well for you. But time and time again, I kept mentioning that in my opinion, I would be very, very hesitant to buy Nvidia shares. We have a pivot point here on the weekly, 114.89. That could potentially be the next stop, which would bring us below the moving average, which would keep us bearish, bringing us down to potentially the next support level of 76.89. That's on the weekly. If we check on the daily, we dropped again straight down below the 200-day, and we can see this pivot point right here, 116.22. We came close within about half a point of that pivot point. So, in my opinion, I do think it tests that point, and of course, in theory, it should break through it and go even lower. But it has a mind of its own, and even going back, the last several months and several years, anytime there was a sell-off and a dip, people would always say, oh, Nvidia's down, I'm adding to it. Oh, Nvidia dropped, I'm buying the dip. And that's why, in my eyes, the stock remained up. Everyone and their brother is so bullish on this stock that it's just become unrealistic, in my opinion. And even as we read before, who was it? Concord, with a $200 price target maintained today on this news? Like, how can you come out and say that? How can you come out and say that? That's what blows my mind. But that's really pretty much it for Nvidia. I mean, we can do updates as we go. And again, not to be a schmuck, in my opinion, I'm not surprised. Multiple stock splits here. I don't know. Again, it just went too high too quick. And even though other stocks are taking a hit today, I still say, in my opinion, I'd rather invest into the AMDs, the IBMs, the SMCIs, as opposed to rolling the dice near the high with even markets potentially selling off. We spoke about this as well. We spoke about how the DXY, the dollar, is getting stronger now under the Trump administration. As soon as he won the election, the dollar started to climb. In theory, when the dollar goes up, stocks are supposed to come down. And also, you can see the massive bull run that tech has been on for the last couple of years. So that's why, in my opinion, the sell-off is justified, it is overdue, and it may just be the beginning. So I want everyone to stay sharp and, stay on the ball out there and try to protect your downsides if and where you can, of course. But that's pretty much it. I'll end it there. Once again, Stocks by the Numbers, I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That's our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.